Hello, I'm Linda Darling-Hammond. I am the president of the Learning Policy Institute and also president of the State Board of Education. And I am so pleased to be able to communicate with those of you who are working on accelerating learning across the state of California. This is such an important time and such an important strategy for us to be taking up, not only for students who have been impacted by the pandemic, but for all of our students going forward in this state. I'm going to say a few words about the strategies that research has suggested are helpful. I think this will be something that you will resonate with because you're already engaged in doing this. And I also want to thank you for the work that you're doing, both to support other educators in learning to reframe their work around acceleration and for the students themselves. I'm going to speak from the perspective of the principles of the science of learning and development. A number of us across the country have been really looking at what neuroscience is telling us, what the learning sciences, developmental sciences are saying about how we learn and develop, and what can support us most effectively as human beings in our learning. One of the things that we've learned that was not known when we invented the factory model schools that we now have inherited is that the brain is always developing as a product of relationships and experiences. It's not as though we're born with a set of genetic, footprints, and that determines what we can learn throughout our lives. In fact, even at my age, the brain is wiring and rewiring the neurons that fire together, wire together, and allow us to continue to build intelligence and capacity, as well as specific elements of concepts and skills. And the quality of the relationships and the experiences that we create matter greatly for what we can learn. And actually, we even have evidence from the growth mindset literature that when children know that their brain is actually growing and connecting and expanding and becoming more capable, it actually improves their learning outcomes because they develop a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset, which says, oh, I'm not good at math, or, oh, I can't do such and such. They come to understand that as they put forth effort with support, they can learn more and, in fact, grow more intelligences. We also know that learning is social, emotional, and academic, that they are completely connected to one another. That when we feel good about the context we're in, when we have trust with our teachers and our colleagues, when we're interested and excited about the learning, we learn more effectively. When we feel anxious or stigmatized, when we think that we are in an unsafe environment, or that we are likely to reinforce bad impressions that people may have about us because of social identity threats or stigma, we learn less well. So we have to create environments that are socially supportive and emotionally supportive in order to get the strongest academic learning. Particularly important when students are, in a mode of needing to accelerate their learning because of the events that have been obstacles for them. Children actively construct their knowledge. We all are about connecting what we know to what we're trying to learn. And everything we know is learned in cultural contexts. So the extent to which we can connect for children what they bring to the classroom, to what we're trying to help them learn, to that extent, they will learn more effectively. We also know that students' perceptions of their own ability influence their learning. So we have to be very careful in schools not to create identifiers, ranking systems, labels of various kinds that are connoting a limit on anyone's ability. And again, we inherited a lot of labeling and tracking systems from the factory model created 100 years ago that we have to be querying and unpacking in order to give kids the optimal opportunity to grow and learn. We know that trauma and adversity do affect learning. They affect the way the brain operates. They affect behavior. They affect the way in which we can pay attention and focus. If we are anxious, if we've been traumatized, we have to have experiences of healing, of centering, of being able to calm ourselves, of being able to know that there are people who care about us that we can relate to, work with, and get help from in order to overcome the effects of that trauma. And we know that a child's best performance occurs under conditions of low threat and high support in settings where they feel accepted, respected, and enabled. So that really tells us why we should accelerate rather than engaging in what has often been the approach to remediation, where we identify some students as behind or below, and then we put them in classrooms together to get what has often been a sort of test prep kind of curriculum that is not particularly emotionally supportive or engaging and may bring labels with it. But virtually all students are motivated to learn the next thing they're ready to learn in that zone of proximal development when they experience encouragement, supportive relationships, and the work that they are ready to undertake and getting evidence of their progress. That is actually a sort of a virtuous cycle that we can put in place if we give students the right conditions. Very few people are motivated by being labeled as behind or below or placed in a remedial setting that often, unfortunately, has coupled boredom with that stigma. So part of what we need to do to accelerate learning is to create environments that have much less activation of cortisol, which is the hormone that we activate under stress or trauma or anxiety, and that then impedes our ability, the brain's ability to think clearly, to focus, and environments that are much more filled with that create the conditions that produce oxytocin, which is the hormone that I think of as the hugging hormone that can be virtual or physical, where we feel support, acceptance, a kind of love that allows our brains to open up for us to be relaxed enough and attentive enough and engaged enough to be able to learn. So, of course, social emotional learning, as well as restorative practices, which engage schools in community building, in creating the context in which students can express their experiences and how they feel and bond with each other and bond with the teacher, as well as to learn those skills like the ability to recognize emotions and to manage emotions and to center and to learn skills of interpersonal contact and support for one another, as well as conflict resolution skills and problem solving skills. All of those things really enable academic gains. They're not a distraction from the academics. They are actually the pathway to achievement gains. We know, as I said, that a child's best performance occurs under conditions of low threat and high support. We know that a safe and nurturing environment supports a sense of belonging. It affirms accomplishments. It minimizes stereotype threat, which is the kind of threat that students and actually adults also experience if any one of our identities is stigmatized as a function of race, immigration status, economic status, disability status. When we feel that we are stereotyped or potentially being viewed through a stereotypic lens, we actually shut down and perform much less well. There's a whole body of research on that. So if we can actively make sure that students know that they are viewed as competent, that they're in a belonging environment, where they're being affirmed and acknowledged for their accomplishments, they will learn more effectively. And of course, that requires explicit attention to those skills and practices. We know from the research that when we're taking up strategies for acceleration, we want to start where the student is in their learning. We need to build on their interests and their passions as well, and their ways of learning. We can use learning progressions to guide instruction. And I will say in the upcoming mathematics framework that the state will be releasing, we asked that the learning progressions in mathematics be very clearly laid out so that rather than teaching over students' heads or under their heads, we're able to locate where they are in that progression of learning and then build on a solid foundation to guide instruction. We know that it matters when we can continually appraise progress, not in a labeling way or a ranking or rating way, but in a way that says, you've accomplished this. And now the next thing that we're going to do is this. That kind of diagnostic approach with authentic evidence of the performance that the student has accomplished really allows a stronger path forward. We know that it matters that we affirm and applaud whatever has been mastered, and that we offer very specific feedback, constructive feedback about what's been done and accomplished and done well, and then instruction about the next steps or what needs to be learned more deeply, and then opportunities to redo and revise. And I'll just stop on that for a moment to say that this practice of what I think of as revision and redemption is extremely powerful in the research worldwide. One of the most important things we can do to get the largest achievement gains is to give students the opportunity, when they've tried something once, to learn how to correct their mistakes, to learn how to deepen their performance, and immediately redo and revise. And that means we can't have a curriculum that's just give a chapter, give a test, give a grade. It means that we have to construct these kinds of learning opportunities and performances, and then allow for time to get feedback and practice, which creates a very steep upward learning curve. It also reduces achievement gaps. We know that it's important to grade based on the ultimate learning, not to average in the failed attempts or the difficulties that kids have experienced, but to basically acknowledge and give them feedback and grades based on what they've gotten to, where they've ultimately learned. And also we know that for students who may be getting a lab course or an additional time for support or tutoring or additional learning after school or during the school day, you can look ahead to the next lesson they're going to get in their math class or their English language arts class and hack the next lesson with them, it could actually support their readiness and confidence in class to be, really there and performing and gaining more confidence. Confidence and competence go together. So we also know that this requires the school as a whole to think differently about the use of time and the use of people. It's not just what the individual teacher can do in the individual classroom, although there are certainly things to be done there that can accelerate learning optimally. Obviously, within the classroom, learning centers, individual and small group work times with differentiated materials and supports can make a big difference. But there can also be designated acceleration times during the day when individual and small group tutoring and extra practice and revision can occur. And finding those times and then staffing them in ways that are supportive can make a huge difference for individuals. And those can be not just for students who are, quote, catching up, but it can also be for all students to get various kinds of opportunities for learning that are appropriate to what they need or are interested in. Special lab classes that are attached to courses can be very productive. I know in a school that I was involved with, high school, small high school that we designed for students who had been dropping out at very high rates. 2/3 of the students in that community had been dropping out. And those coming into ninth grade were typically reading at the third grade level and doing math at the fourth grade level. But we wanted to teach the A through G curriculum and get them ready for college and careers. We attached to a double block algebra course, which occurred over the whole year, an additional lab period where students could go deeper and catch up on things that they may have missed or solidify their understandings much more in an individualized way. And in that context, we were able to get 90% of students graduated and 90% out in college within typically 4 years of high school. But we had to think about how to do those double block periods and those special lab classes attached to the courses where students may have had the most variable prior experience. Obviously, after school is a space, Saturday school can be a space, summer school is a very important space for accelerating learning in ways that are joyful, that include a lot of pleasurable activities. We also know that kids learn well when they get a lot of exercise. In Finland, they actually send the kids out of doors just about every hour in the hour for 15 minutes, even in the middle of the snow, even the little kids, to get, that kind of movement and exercise, nutrition, all of those things that support the learning moments, but that are also part of the way human beings function well, can help. And I'm just going to close with this little example. Many years ago, 1984, Benjamin Bloom, who you may know from the Bloom's taxonomy of skills, did a set of studies, but he reported them in an article that has been reinforced in all the years since, the findings, which is that when we teach in the conventional manner, you see that bell curve. One teacher, 30 students, kind of going through the material and then giving a test and giving a grade and going through the next material. You do kind of get the bell curve kind of result. But if you do mastery learning, where students are actually involved in doing something and immediately getting feedback and revising their work and redoing it so that they can get to a mastery level, you move the entire curve to the right. So that the student who would have been at the 50th percentile is now at like the 67th percentile. And if you do that same thing in a one-on-one or one-on-two basis with a very small kind of tutorial where you're really able to personalize, the entire curve goes further to the right and gets higher. See, the level of the achievement is much higher for everyone. And we've seen this in these recent studies about high quality, high intensity tutoring, where students are getting regular tutoring from the same person multiple times in a week, tailored to their proximal development zone. And we see very, very different outcomes. So we know a lot about how to do this. We've got to design schools to make it possible. We also see that when we build on successful learning, we can accelerate further. And I just want to say that I know people feel that it's important to teach the grade level standards. And we always need those grade level standards as a North Star, as a goal. But if going through a pacing guide teaches over the heads of students, they make much less progress than if we teach right to where they are and are allowed to build the skills that they actually need and may have missed. So this is just a graph that shows for a math program that gives an analysis of where kids are on a daily basis and gives teachers guidance for the next lessons they could teach. In the schools where they were allowed to teach along the zone of proximal development, along the learning progression, students over the course of time gained 38 points in percentile rankings. In those places where teachers were constrained only to teach the grade level standards in a pacing guide, you see they only gained about 7 points. So students will learn no matter what we do, but if we can be attentive to where they are and what they need, they can learn much more and much faster. There are a lot of resources that I know you're getting from the accelerated learning centers and the initiative as a whole across the state. Here are some more. We'll put these up on the website that will allow you to find additional information about the topics I've discussed. Again, I just want to thank you for all of the terrific work you're doing on behalf of our kids and for reinventing learning for them here in California.